After that afternoon at Greenwood Mall, nothing sounded the same anymore. The parking lot still filled and emptied on schedule. Store lights still flicked on as dusk settled. Somewhere inside the mall, a register chimed, receipts printed, music drifted softly through speakers. On the surface, life kept moving. But beneath it, something had cracked, and everyone felt it, even if no one could fully explain why. By nightfall, Greenwood Mall wasn't just a shopping center, it was a headline. Videos flooded social media, grainy clips, shaky hands, cropped angles, a black woman in handcuffs, a raised voice, a uniform, a crowd that didn't know when to step in or look away. Comment sections exploded into battlefields. Some called it procedure, others called it abuse. Many argued without knowing a single fact beyond what fit their beliefs. And in the middle of all of it was a name everyone repeated but few understood, Denise Carter. At home, the television glowed in the corner of her living room, volume low but relentless. Her name crawled across the screen beneath the face of a commentator who had never met her. Pundits debated her tone, her posture, her expression. They dissected seconds of footage like evidence of a personality flaw. Denise didn't watch. She sat on the edge of her couch, elbows resting on her knees, hands open in her lap as if unsure what to do with them now. Red marks circled her wrists, faint but unmistakable, the kind that didn't need explanation, the kind that stayed longer than bruises. The house was quiet in the way that feels deliberate, almost judgmental. No sirens, no radios, no voices asking for her opinion, just the hum of the refrigerator and the slow tick of the clock above the hallway. For 20 years, silence had meant peace. Tonight, it felt like exile. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification, another message she didn't open. She already knew the pattern. Some were supportive, strangers calling her brave, strong, a symbol. Others were vicious, telling her she should have complied, should have known better, should have stayed in her place. A few were quieter, more dangerous, warnings disguised as advice. Denise set the phone face down on the coffee table. Earlier that evening, an email had arrived from the department. Short, polite, carefully worded. It spoke of reviews and procedures and pending clarification. It didn't accuse her of anything directly. It didn't need to. The distance in the language said enough. For the first time in her career, the system hadn't closed ranks around her. It had stepped back and watched. That hurt more than the cuffs. She leaned back, staring at the darkened window. Her reflection stared back, older than she remembered. Not weaker, just tired in a way sleep wouldn't fix. She thought about how many times she'd defended the badge to people who didn't trust it. How many times she'd said the system wasn't perfect, but it was trying. Tonight, the system felt very sure of itself. Outside, a car passed slowly, headlights brushing across the wall. Denise's shoulders tightened before she could stop herself. That reaction alone made her jaw clench. She had faced armed suspects without flinching. Now, a passing car made her body brace. Something had shifted inside her, too. Her sister had called twice. Her niece once. Denise hadn't answered. She wasn't ready to explain a story she didn't fully understand herself. All she knew was that a moment she hadn't planned for had swallowed everything she'd built. On the TV, a reporter stood in front of Greenwood Mall, bright lights behind him, certainty in his voice. Authorities say the incident is under review. Denise reached for the remote and turned the screen black. The room felt heavier without the noise, but cleaner somehow. Honest. She closed her eyes and exhaled slowly, the way she'd taught rookies to do when panic crept in. Control what you can. Breathe. Assess. But there was nothing left to assess. Not yet. Somewhere out there, people were deciding who she was for her. Some were already convinced. Others were waiting for a version of the story that made them comfortable. None of them knew the full truth. Not the fear, not the humiliation, not the quiet realization that the rules she had lived by might never have been meant to protect someone like her. Denise opened her eyes again, staring at her hands. Whatever had happened at Greenwood Mall wasn't over. It had only just begun. And though no one realized it yet, the person they had already dismissed, underestimated, and misunderstood was about to change the outcome forever. What if they don't care that you're being respectful? The question surfaced in Denise Carter's mind as she locked the front door behind her, though she didn't yet know why it felt relevant. She paused, checking the handle twice out of habit, then adjusted the collar of her jacket. Everything about her morning had been deliberate, the same way it always was. Discipline had shaped her life for more than 2 decades. Wake before sunrise, coffee black, shoes polished even on days off. Rules weren't just guidelines to Denise, they were anchors. They were how order survived chaos, how trust was built, how the right choices eventually led to the right outcomes. At least, that was what she believed. At 48, Denise had earned her rank the slow way. No shortcuts, no favors, just years of quiet competence that made people stop questioning her presence in the room. As a police captain, she spoke less than most and listened more. She believed in procedure not because it was perfect, but because it was the only thing standing between power and abuse. Today, she was off duty. That mattered to her. The drive to Greenwood Mall was uneventful, radio low, traffic steady. Her thoughts focused on one simple thing. Kayla's birthday was coming up, and her niece had been dropping hints for weeks. Jewelry. Something grown, but not too grown. Something that made a 13-year-old feel seen. The mall parking lot was busy but calm. Families, couples, teenagers killing time. Denise parked, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, and allowed herself a small smile. No badge, no radio, just an aunt running an errand. Inside, Greenwood Mall smelled like pretzels and perfume. Sunlight poured through the skylights, catching on polished floors. Music played softly overhead. Denise walked with an easy, unhurried pace, her purse resting comfortably against her hip. 8 minutes in, the air changed. She noticed it first as a feeling, not a sight. That subtle pressure between the shoulders, the sense of being measured. Years on the force had sharpened her instincts beyond conscious thought. She passed a window display and caught their reflection. 2 security guards, one tall and broad-shouldered, his badge reading Miller. The other, shorter, younger, with a restless posture, Davis. They weren't close enough to confront her, not far enough to ignore. Miller spoke into his radio, eyes locked on her reflection. Davis shifted his weight, glancing between Denise and the crowd like he wasn't sure where he belonged. Denise's jaw tightened. She kept walking. Copy that. Miller's voice crackled, not as quiet as he thought. Brown leather bag, blue jacket, eyes forward. Her steps never faltered, but something inside her did. She'd heard that tone before, used it herself when necessary. The difference was context. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't in a briefing room. She was shopping. Denise considered turning around, flashing her badge, ending it before it began. Instead, she chose restraint. You did nothing wrong, she reminded herself, and that should be enough. She stepped into a boutique near the central corridor, drawn by a display of silver bracelets. The store was calm, soft lighting, a faint floral scent. A middle-aged white woman behind the counter stiffened the moment Denise entered. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her smile tight, professional but guarded. "Just looking," Denise replied, keeping her tone pleasant. She moved slowly, giving herself time. The bracelet caught her eye immediately. Delicate, simple, perfect for Kayla. In the mirrored wall behind the counter, Denise saw the woman's eyes track her movements. Outside the entrance, Miller and Davis hovered, pretending to study a directory. All the pieces lined up too neatly. "Locked cases," the clerk announced, stepping closer than necessary. "We need to assist with anything you want to see." "I understand," Denise said calmly. "I'll let you know." The woman didn't move away. Denise felt the familiar sting rise in her chest. Not fear, not yet. Something older. Something heavier. The quiet knowledge that in this space, her intentions didn't matter. Her history didn't matter. Only perception did. Still, she stayed calm. Still, she believed control belonged to the person who followed. The rules. She reached for the bracelet, stopping short of the glass. "I'd like to see that one, please." The clerk hesitated. Her hand shook slightly as she unlocked the case. Denise noticed everything. The radio murmurs outside, the way Davis avoided her eyes, the way Miller's stance widened, ready. This was not about jewelry. As the clerk lifted the bracelet, Denise felt it then. The real fear, not of being detained, but of how fast a person could be reduced, how quickly respect could vanish, how easily someone could decide who you were before you ever spoke. She straightened her shoulders. Everything was still under control, she told herself. Then a voice cut through the space, loud and confident, carrying the weight of assumed authority. "What seems to be the problem here?" Denise turned toward the entrance. Officer James Raines had arrived. The accusation didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly, wrapped in politeness, dressed up as concern. Denise felt it before she heard it. The clerk's posture changed first. Her shoulders squared. Her voice rose just enough to carry beyond the glass cases. I'm going to need you to stay right there. Denise turned slowly. Stay where? The woman glanced toward the doorway where Miller now stood fully inside the boutique, no longer pretending to browse. Davis hovered behind him, eyes darting, jaw tight. There's been an issue, the clerk said. Something from this case appears to be missing. The words landed softly, carefully, like they had been practiced. Denise felt a familiar heat climb her spine, not explosive, but controlled, calculated, the kind that came from knowing exactly what was happening. That's not possible, Denise replied evenly. I haven't touched anything except what you placed in my hand. The clerk's eyes flicked to Denise's purse. Brown leather, well worn, expensive, but not flashy. I saw you move something toward your bag, she said, louder now. A ripple passed through the boutique. Other shoppers froze. Someone near the earrings display slowly pulled out their phone. Denise inhaled through her nose. She had been in interrogation rooms far more hostile than this. She knew how lies were constructed, how confidence replaced facts when people expected not to be challenged. Ma'am, Miller stepped closer, his voice carrying the weight of assumed authority. For everyone's sake, let's just clear this up. Clear what up? Denise asked. Open your bag. There it was. Not a request. Not really. A demand framed as cooperation, a test disguised as procedure. Denise looked at him for a long moment. She noticed how his hand hovered near his radio, not his badge, how his stance blocked the exit, how Davis shifted uncomfortably, already regretting being there. I'm not opening my bag, Denise said. The room went still. Miller frowned, as if she'd violated an unspoken rule. That's not how this works. Actually, Denise replied calmly, that's exactly how it works. You're accusing me of theft without evidence. You don't have probable cause to search my personal property. The clerk scoffed. If you didn't take anything, you wouldn't mind showing us. Denise felt the weight of that sentence press down on her chest. She'd heard it too many times. In traffic stops, in holding cells, in whispered advice passed down like survival tips. If you're innocent, prove it. No, Denise said quietly. That's not how innocence works. Her heart was pounding now, but her voice didn't betray it. 20 years of training held it steady. She kept her hands visible, her posture open, non-threatening. This isn't about a bracelet, Denise continued. This is about you deciding I look like someone who would steal. Miller's jaw tightened. You're refusing a lawful request. It's not lawful, Denise corrected. And I'm refusing to be humiliated for your comfort. Davis finally spoke, his voice barely audible. Maybe we should just check the cameras. The clerk shot him a sharp look. The cameras don't always catch everything. Denise almost smiled at that. Almost. So now we're moving from suspicion to assumption, she said. Interesting. Miller stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Denise met his gaze. No, you are. She could feel eyes on her from every angle. The heat of judgment, the quiet calculation happening in strangers' minds. If she opened the bag, this would end. She knew that. They would apologize half-heartedly. Someone might even say, thank you for cooperating. And tomorrow, they would do it again to someone else. She thought of Kayla, of the questions her niece had started asking lately. About fairness, about why things felt different for people who looked like them. I'm not opening my bag, Denise repeated. Miller exhaled sharply and turned toward the counter. Call it in. The clerk's fingers were already dialing. Denise felt the moment lock into place, solid and irreversible. The room had shifted. The line had been crossed. She stood there, shoulders squared, knowing she had just chosen the harder path. She didn't know yet how far it would take her, only that there was no turning back now. The weight was worse than the accusation. It stretched thin, elastic, filling every corner of the boutique with a tension that felt almost physical. Denise could hear the low murmur of the mall outside, laughter drifting past the storefront, footsteps that had nothing to do with her. Life moving on while she stood frozen in a moment that was quietly turning dangerous. Miller stood near the entrance now, radio pressed to his shoulder, possible theft in progress. Suspect refusing to cooperate, requesting police assistance. The word suspect landed like a verdict. Denise's eyes flicked briefly to Davis. He looked pale, younger than she'd first guessed. too young to be this certain about something he clearly didn't understand. "You're escalating this unnecessarily," Denise said, her voice steady but firm. "There are cameras everywhere. Let's review the footage." The clerk shook her head quickly. "We don't need to do all that if you just open your bag." That sentence again. The easy solution, the quiet surrender. Denise felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. The room wanted her to comply, to smooth things over, to be agreeable. The world often asked black women to carry that burden without complaint. She didn't. "I'm not doing that," she said. "And you know why." Miller scoffed. "You think you're smarter than everyone here?" Denise met his stare. "I think I know my rights." That was the moment his expression changed. The irritation hardened into something sharper, something personal. "You people always say that." The words slipped out before he could stop them. The boutique went silent. Denise felt a chill move through her chest, cold and unmistakable. There it was. Not suspicion, not procedure. Just bias, finally stepping out from behind the curtain. She straightened, her voice dropping lower, more controlled. "Be careful what you say next." Miller's radio crackled again, louder this time. "Officer en route. 2 minutes out. 2 minutes." Denise calculated without thinking. Distance to the exit. Number of witnesses. Who was filming? Who looked away? She had walked into situations like this 1,000 times as an officer. The difference now was simple and terrifying. She wasn't wearing the uniform. The clerk folded her arms, confidence returning as backup approached. "You brought this on yourself," she said. "If you'd just done what we asked, none of this would be happening." Denise felt something shift inside her. Not anger, not fear. Clarity. "No," she replied softly. "This was happening the moment you decided I didn't belong here." Outside, a figure moved quickly through the gathering crowd. The sound of boots against tile cut through the murmurs. Officer James Raines entered the boutique like he owned it. Tall, broad, confident in the way men get when the uniform has always worked for them. His eyes swept the room once, already forming conclusions. "What's going on?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. The clerk spoke quickly, eagerly. She stole something and refused to open her bag. Raines' gaze locked onto Denise. She recognized him immediately, not personally, by reputation. Complaints that went nowhere. Use of force reports that somehow always cleared review. A name that surfaced too often in the wrong places. Denise held his stare. "Sir," Raines said, stepping closer, "you're being detained pending investigation." "Detained for what?" Denise asked, standing still. "For refusing to cooperate," he snapped. "Turn around." Denise didn't move. "I have not committed a crime," she said clearly. "You have no probable cause." Raines smiled, slow and humorless. "Probable cause is what I say it is." The air thickened. Phones were out now. No one pretended otherwise. The moment had grown teeth. Denise felt the edges, closing in. The weight of authority pressing down without reason or restraint. Still, she stayed where she was. This was the choice. Not just to refuse opening a bag, but to refuse erasing herself to make others comfortable. She didn't know yet what it would cost. Only that this single moment, quiet and defiant, had already changed everything. The moment force entered the room, everything sped up and slowed down at the same time. Officer James Raines didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority sat on him like armor, heavy and unquestioned. He stepped into Denise's space, close enough that she could smell coffee on his breath, close enough that the line between procedure and intimidation disappeared. "Turn around," he said. Denise stayed still. "I haven't done anything illegal," she replied, loud enough for the people filming to hear. "You don't have grounds to detain me." Raines didn't answer her. He reached out, gripping her arm with sudden firmness, fingers digging in as if to remind her how easily control could be taken. Gasps rippled through the boutique. Denise stumbled one step back as he twisted her wrist behind her. Pain flared sharp and unexpected, not unbearable but deliberate, calculated, enough to send a message. "Stop resisting," Raines barked. "I'm not resisting," Denise said through clenched teeth. "I'm standing still." The words didn't matter. Cold metal snapped around her wrists. The sound was unmistakable. Final. A click that echoed far louder than it should have. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God." Phones lifted higher, screens glowed. The moment had already escaped the room. Rains guided her forward, one hand firm between her shoulder blades, steering her like she was something dangerous. The clerk stood frozen behind the counter, face pale now that the situation had grown larger than her accusation. As they exited the boutique, the mall corridor seemed to narrow. Shoppers stopped mid-stride. Conversations died. Eyes followed her like she was a spectacle. Denise felt the heat of it. Judgment, curiosity, satisfaction, fear. She held her head high, even as her wrists burned. "This is unnecessary," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "You're making a mistake." Rains leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You should have thought of that before causing a scene." They walked past the fountain, past children staring wide-eyed, past a woman who shook her head slowly, lips pressed together like she didn't know what side she was on. Denise's heart pounded, but her mind stayed sharp. "Officer," she said clearly, "I need you to listen to me." Rains stopped. The sudden pause made the crowd lean in. "I am a police captain," Denise said. "15th Precinct. My badge is in my front pocket. You are violating my rights." For half a second, uncertainty flickered across Rains' face. Then he laughed. "Sure you are," he said loudly. "Everyone's something when they get caught." "A few people." Snorted. Someone muttered, "Yeah, right." Rains tightened his grip and resumed walking. Denise felt something break inside her. Not fear, not anger. Trust. Every lesson she'd taught younger officers about discretion, about fairness, about restraint played back in her mind like a cruel joke. Outside, the afternoon sun was harsh, too bright, too exposed. Rains positioned her beside the patrol car, one hand on her shoulder, holding her in place while he spoke to mall security. His voice was calm, professional, as if nothing extraordinary was happening. Denise looked around, at the phone still recording, at the strangers deciding who she was in real time, at the system she had defended now standing comfortably against her. This was no longer about a bracelet. It was about power, and it was already spreading far beyond Greenwood Mall. They didn't keep her long enough for the damage to settle in. Rains leaned Denise against the hood of the patrol car, his hand heavy on her upper back. Not rough enough to look brutal, just firm enough to remind her who controlled the moment. He spoke into his radio in clipped, confident phrases, painting a picture that already sounded finished. Uncooperative, refused lawful commands, disorderly behavior. Denise stared straight ahead, jaw tight. She could hear people talking behind her, not shouting, not protesting, just narrating. She shouldn't have argued. Why didn't she just open the bag? She looks calm for someone who stole something. Each sentence landed like a small cut. Not deep, not dramatic, just enough to bleed. Denise turned her head slightly. "I want my supervisor notified," she said. "And I want this documented." Every step. Rains smirked. "You really sticking to this story, huh?" "It's not a story," she replied. "It's my career." That made him pause. Just for a second. He looked at her again, more closely this time. Not as a suspect, not quite as a joke. Something about her posture, the way she spoke, the absence of panic. It didn't fit his usual script. Still, pride won. "You know what your problem is," Rains said quietly. "You think being calm makes you right." Denise met his eyes. "I think being right makes me right." He laughed again, louder this time, for the benefit of the crowd. "All right, Captain," he said with mock respect. "Let's take a breath." He stepped away, conferring briefly with another officer who had arrived late, clearly trying to piece together what he'd missed. Phones were everywhere now. Someone was live streaming. A teenage girl whispered to her friend, "This is gonna blow up." Rains turned back to Denise. "We're going to release you pending further investigation," he said. "Don't leave town." "Pending what investigation?" Denise asked. "You haven't even alleged a specific crime." Rains leaned in close again. "We'll find one." The cuffs came off. The sudden absence of pressure made Denise's wrists throb. She flexed her fingers slowly, blood rushing back, the red marks already. Darkening. She expected relief. Instead, she felt hollow. As Rains stepped away, a woman in the crowd finally spoke up. "This isn't right," she said. "You didn't even check the cameras." Others shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded. Others avoided eye contact. Rains ignored them all. Denise stood there alone for a moment, uncuffed but exposed. No apology, no explanation, just space where dignity should have been. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her badge, holding it up now that it no longer mattered. "Captain Denise Carter," she said, not shouting, just stating a fact. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Someone gasped. Another voice said, "Wait, she's a cop." Rains didn't turn around. He walked back toward his cruiser, already dialing his phone, already writing his version of events. By the time Denise made it back to her car, notifications were flooding in. The video had gone live. Clips cut to 15 seconds, 30. No context, no beginning, no end, just the cuffs. The escort. The badge revealed too late to change anything. Comment sections filled faster than facts ever could. She should have complied. This is exactly why people don't trust the police. Good for her standing up. She brought this on herself. Denise sat behind the wheel, hands resting on her thighs, staring straight ahead. The mall looked the same. Shoppers still came and went. Nothing burned, nothing shattered, but something had shifted. She started the engine and pulled out slowly, feeling eyes on her even now. The system hadn't crushed her, not yet. But as Greenwood Mall disappeared in her rearview mirror, Denise understood something with a clarity that hurt. She had walked in believing the rules would protect her. She was leaving, knowing they never had. The report hit her inbox before dawn. Denise hadn't slept much. She'd spent the night replaying the sounds of the cuffs, the weight of Rain's hand on her back, the way the crowd's attention had shifted from concern to curiosity to judgment. When the email notification chimed, she was already awake, sitting at her kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and a legal pad she hadn't written a single word on. Subject line, incident summary and officer statement. She opened it slowly. By the third paragraph, her stomach dropped. According to Officer James Rains, Denise Carter had been aggressive from the moment he arrived, verbally hostile, non-compliant, physically resistant. The report described a woman who bore no resemblance to the one Denise knew herself to be. It painted her as volatile, confrontational, unstable. She read the words twice, then a third time. Struck officer during lawful detention, attempted to incite crowd, displayed erratic behavior. Denise leaned back in her chair, the room tilting slightly. This wasn't just a lie, it was a strategy. She knew the language. She had seen it used before. The right phrases placed in the right order could turn any encounter into justification. Once it was written, it became reality. Paper carried more weight than memory, more weight than truth. Her phone buzzed. Internal Affairs wants to speak with you today. The message was short, professional, final. At headquarters, the air felt different. People she'd known for years avoided her eyes. Conversation stopped when she walked past. A few nodded stiffly, unsure which side of history they were supposed to be on. Her access badge worked, but just barely. A reminder that it could stop at any moment. In the interview room, Internal Affairs didn't raise their voices either. They didn't have to. They asked about her tone, her posture, why she hadn't complied, why she'd escalated a simple situation. Denise answered calmly, precisely. She stuck to facts. It didn't matter. By the end of the meeting, the decision had already been made. Pending investigation, Captain Carter, you are placed on administrative suspension. The words landed heavier than the cuffs ever had. Her badge was taken, her weapon secured. A process she had overseen for others now turned inward. She walked out of the building carrying a small cardboard box, a desk plant, a framed photo of her and Kayla at a softball game years ago. 20 years reduced to items that fit under one arm. Outside, reporters waited. Captain Carter, do you regret how you handled the situation? Is this about race? Do you think you set a bad example? Denise said nothing. She didn't trust her voice yet. By the time she reached her car, her phone was vibrating nonstop. News alerts, commentary. Think pieces written by people who had never worn a uniform, never been cornered, never had to decide whether dignity was worth the cost. Troubled police captain under review. Sources say officer followed protocol. Questions raised about Carter's judgment. At home, she sat in the dark, blinds half closed, television off. The silence pressed in again, heavier than before. A knock came at the door just after sunset. Carla Johnson didn't wait for Denise to answer before stepping inside. She took one look at her friend's face and dropped her purse on the table. They're burying you, Carla said. Denise nodded. I know. Carla was a defense attorney. Sharp, relentless, the kind of woman who read between lines because she knew that's where the truth usually hid. I've been digging, Carla continued, pacing the room. Greenwood Mall keeps coming up in my caseload. Same charges, same officers, same script. Denise looked up. Black clients, Carla said. Shoplifting accusations, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest. They get scared. They take plea deals. What happens after the plea? Denise asked. Private probation, Carla replied. Monthly fees, mandatory check-ins. Miss a payment, you're back in court. It's a loop. Denise felt something cold settle in her chest. How many cases? Dozens that I know of. Probably more. Denise closed her eyes. This wasn't about her refusal to open a bag. It was bigger, systemic, organized, profitable. Her phone buzzed again. A text this time. Unknown number. You should let this go. A minute later, another. People get hurt when they don't know their place. Denise stared at the screen. Outside, a car passed slowly, too slowly. That night, she double-checked the locks, turned on every light. She laid out the notes Carla had brought, timelines and names spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle that didn't want to be solved. Sometime after midnight, glass shattered. Denise jolted upright, heart racing. The sound came from her study. She moved quietly, every sense alert, but whoever had been there was already gone. Drawers pulled open, papers scattered, her laptop untouched, but the folder she'd started compiling was missing. Names, patterns, connections, gone. She sank into the chair, the weight finally crushing her. Suspended, discredited, threatened, and now robbed of the very proof she needed. Somewhere along the way, the institution she had given her life to had chosen itself over her. Denise Carter had reached the bottom. And for the first time in 20 years, she wasn't sure who she could trust to help her back up. The next morning confirmed what the night had already made clear. Denise woke to silence that felt hostile. No radio chatter, no early briefings, no uniform waiting on the chair. Her badge and service weapon were gone, locked away by procedure that now felt like exile. The absence of weight on her belt was disorienting, like a phantom limb. She stood at the kitchen sink, watching coffee drip she no longer wanted, when her phone lit up again. Another headline, Suspended Captain at Center of Mall Incident Faces Scrutiny. She didn't open it. She already knew the angle. Concerned sources, questions about temperament, subtle language that turned her into a liability without ever calling her a liar. By noon, the calls stopped coming. That was worse. In the early afternoon, Denise drove to the precinct anyway. Not because she was required to, but because she needed to see it with her own eyes. The building looked the same. Flag out front. Familiar brick. The place where she had spent more waking hours than her own home. Inside, no one stopped her. No one greeted her either. A few officers glanced up, then away. One younger patrolman hesitated, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then thought better of it. Denise didn't blame him. Silence was safer. In the hallway near the lockers, she heard her name. I heard Raines already filed his supplemental report. Internal Affairs signed off fast. Captain or not, she should have just complied. Denise kept walking. In her old office, the door was locked, her nameplate already gone. That was when the truth finally settled in. This wasn't an investigation. It was containment. Carla met her later that evening, files tucked under her arm, anger simmering just beneath her calm. I talked to a clerk at the courthouse, Carla said, off the record. Greenwood Mall cases are fast-tracked. Same judge, same probation contractor, same outcomes. Denise leaned back against the counter, arms folded. It's a pipeline. Exactly. Arrests feed the system. The system feeds the money. And Raines? Denise asked. Carla's jaw tightened. He's not a rogue. He's a collector, brings in the numbers, makes everyone else richer. Denise thought of the way he'd laughed when she named her rank, the confidence, the certainty that nothing would happen to him, because nothing ever had. That night, the threats escalated. A note slipped under her door. No stamp, no envelope. You're done. A photo appeared in her inbox an hour later. Her house, taken from across the street. Denise sat in the dark, lights off, phone in her hand, breathing slow. Every instinct told her to call for backup, to report it, to escalate. But she already knew where that road led. She scrolled through her contacts, pausing at familiar names, supervisors, command staff, people she had trusted, people who had gone quiet. One name stood out, Lieutenant Mark Harris. 15 years of shared shifts, inside jokes, professional respect. He had vouched for her promotion, had called her one of the best officers he'd ever known. Denise hesitated. Then she typed, "I need help." They took my files. The reply came faster than she expected. I heard, "Best thing you can do is stay low. Let IA handle it. Stay low." Denise stared at the words until the screen dimmed. That was the moment the last piece fell into place. They weren't just letting this happen, they were protecting it. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Last warning. Denise set the phone down gently, like it might explode if she didn't. She walked to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to look out. A car idled across the street. Engine running, lights off, watching. She stepped away, heart pounding, and sank into the chair by the table where her case notes had once been spread. Empty now. Cleaned out by someone who knew exactly what to take. They had stripped her of rank, of authority, of credibility. They had turned colleagues into strangers and silence into policy. And in doing so, they had taken the last thing she'd been holding on to: faith. Denise Carter sat alone in her house, surrounded by absence. No badge, no protection, no allies she could trust. Just the knowledge that the system she had defended for 20 years had closed ranks and pushed her out. She had reached the bottom, and the worst part was not losing her power. It was realizing how easily it had been taken. The truth didn't arrive with sirens or subpoenas. It came quietly, carried by people no one in power had bothered to notice. Denise was sitting at her kitchen table when the knock came. Not sharp, not urgent, careful, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they belonged there. Denise checked the window first, then opened the door just enough to see a young woman standing on her porch. One hand clutching a recorder, the other wrapped around a notebook like it was armor. "My name is Maya Lopez," the woman said. "I'm a reporter. I've been trying to reach you." Denise hesitated. The media had already twisted her story enough. Maya seemed to sense it. "I'm not here for a soundbite. I've been investigating Greenwood Mall for months. What happened to you wasn't an accident." That sentence changed everything. Inside, Maya laid out what she had. Not headlines, not opinions. Patterns, arrest logs, court records, names that repeated too often to be coincidence, black shoppers, minor accusations, charges that always escalated, plea deals that funneled people into the same private probation company. Rain's name was everywhere. "I thought it was just aggressive policing," Maya said. "Then I started following the money." She slid her phone across the table. Denise watched as bank transfers scrolled past. Corporate entities linked to the mall. Payments routed through shell companies, probation fees flowing upward, clean, quiet, legal on paper. "This is a business," Denise whispered. Maya nodded. "And you walked into it." The next call came later that day. "I think I have something you need to see," a young voice said nervously. "My name is Tiana Brooks." They met at a small park near the mall, the kind of place people passed without looking twice. Tiana was 16, hoodie too big, phone gripped tight in her hand. "I didn't know who you were at first," she said. "I was just recording because Officer Rains made my cousin cry last month. When I saw him that day, I started filming early." She pressed play. The video didn't show cuffs. It didn't show shouting. It showed preparation. Rains stood near the boutique entrance minutes before Denise ever walked in. He spoke to the store clerk, pointed, laughed, took a position just out of sight. Then Denise entered the frame. Denise's breath caught. "He already knew," she said. "He picked you," Tiana replied. "Same way he picks everyone." The room felt suddenly too small. All the questions Denise had carried for weeks collapsed into a single brutal clarity. This wasn't about behavior, it was about selection. Maya leaned back, voice tight. "When I tried to push this further, I got jumped outside my apartment. Broken ribs, stitches. They didn't take my notes. They just wanted me scared." Denise felt the weight shift inside her. The fear she'd been carrying didn't disappear, but it changed shape. It sharpened. "They underestimated you," Denise said softly. "Both of you." Maya smiled, bruised but defiant. "They underestimated how many people were watching." Tiana nodded. "My videos backed up everywhere." For the first time since Greenwood Mall, Denise didn't feel alone. She looked at the two of them. A young reporter without protection, a teenager with a phone and courage no one had taught her, people she'd been trained to overlook, people the system had counted on staying quiet. "I spent 20 years believing change came from rank," Denise said, "from being inside the room." She paused, then shook her head. "I was wrong." She thought of every time she'd stayed silent to protect her career, every compromise she'd called practical, every injustice she'd hoped someone else would fix. Silence didn't keep the system stable. It kept it rotten. We do this together,
Kayla will
Denise
like this.
said, carefully, publicly. Maya's eyes lit up. Truth in daylight. Tiana straightened. I know people who'll share it. Everywhere. Denise felt something unfamiliar settle into her chest. Not authority, solidarity. As they sat there, planning, connecting threads, Denise finally understood what the system had never taught her. Justice didn't come from power being exercised behind closed doors. It came from truth being seen. And this time, the people they had underestimated were no longer invisible. The city council chamber had never been that full. People stood shoulder to shoulder along the walls, spilling into the hallway, phones already raised before a single word was spoken. Camera lights washed the room in white heat. Reporters whispered urgently into microphones. The low hum of anticipation felt electric, like the air before a storm. Denise Carter sat in the second row, hands folded, back straight. No badge, no uniform, just a dark blazer and a stack of documents resting on her lap. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, some curious, some sympathetic, some hostile. Officer James Rains leaned against the far wall near the exit, arms crossed, expression bored. He looked comfortable, untouchable, like a man who had never once imagined consequences applying to him. Mayor Collins cleared his throat at the podium. We'll begin with public comments. One speaker after another stepped forward. Residents, activists, parents. Each story different, but the pattern unmistakable. Greenwood Mall, minor accusations, arrests that spiraled, plea deals taken out of fear, years lost to probation fees, and records that never should have existed. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. When Denise's name was called, the room fell quiet. She stood slowly and walked to the podium. Her legs felt steady, even as her heart pounded. She didn't look at Rains. Not yet. My name is Denise Carter, she began. 2 weeks ago, I was arrested at Greenwood Mall for refusing to open my purse. She paused. That's the version you've all seen. What you haven't seen is the pattern behind it. She signaled to the screen behind her. Tiana's video played first. The room leaned forward as Rains appeared on screen, speaking to the store clerk before Denise ever entered, pointing, smiling, positioning himself. Gasps broke out. Denise let the video run its course before speaking again. That wasn't suspicion. That was selection. Next came financial records. Clean spreadsheets projected large and undeniable. Lines connecting the mall's parent company to the private probation contractor. Fees flowing upward. Profits tied directly to arrests. This is not public safety, Denise said. This is a business model. Maya Lopez stood near the side aisle, bruises still faintly visible, as Denise introduced her findings. Court records, victim affidavits, names of people whose lives had been quietly dismantled. Finally, Denise turned. Officer James Rains. Rains straightened, jaw tight. You filed a report claiming I was aggressive, Denise said calmly. That I struck you, that I incited a crowd. She lifted another document. Here are 17 sworn statements contradicting that report. Here is the video evidence. Here is the financial incentive tied to your arrests. Rains stepped forward. This is a witch hunt. Before he could say more, 2 uniformed officers moved to his side. James Rains, one of them said quietly, "You're under arrest." The words hit the room like a dropped plate. Handcuffs came out. Real ones this time. Rains's face drained of color. He looked around, searching for someone, anyone to stop it. No one did. As he was led away, the chamber erupted. Shouts, applause, tears. Phones captured every second. Investigators moved quickly after that. Mall executives escorted out. Officials pulled aside. Subpoenas issued before the meeting even adjourned. Denise stepped back from the podium, suddenly exhausted. She didn't feel victorious. She felt emptied. Outside, night had fallen. Protesters gathered on the steps, chanting softly now. Not in anger, but in something closer to relief. A woman approached Denise, eyes shining. "My son's case is being reopened," she said. "Thank you." Another man nodded silently, placing a hand over his heart. Denise accepted it all quietly. She didn't get her job back that night. Her name wasn't immediately cleared. Some doors would remain closed forever. But the system had cracked. Cases were being reviewed, charges questioned, a pipeline exposed. It wasn't a clean ending, or a loud one, just the truth. Finally standing where it couldn't be ignored. And that, Denise realized as she walked into the cool night air, was enough. Greenwood Mall reopened 3 months later. New management, new security uniforms, fresh banners promising inclusion and transparency. The fountain had been cleaned. The lights felt brighter. On paper, it was a different place. But walls remember. Denise Carter walked through the main entrance on a quiet weekday morning, hands in her coat pockets, moving at an unhurried pace. No cameras followed her now. No crowd gathered, just a few shoppers passing by, unaware of how much had happened on the same polished floors beneath their feet. She paused near the fountain. That was where she'd first felt it. The shift. The moment everything stopped being ordinary. Across the corridor, a young black boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing excitedly at a display window. The mother smiled, relaxed, unguarded. Denise watched them for a moment longer than necessary, letting the sight settle. Some things had changed. Others never would. She passed the jewelry boutique. Different staff, different energy. A sign near the register read, "Security cameras active for your safety." Denise almost laughed. Cameras had never been the problem. Inside, a clerk looked up and smiled. Genuinely. "Let me know if you need anything," she said. Denise nodded in thanks and kept walking. She didn't come back to prove anything. There was nothing left to win. The headlines had moved on. The investigations crawled forward at their own pace. Justice, when it came, arrived quietly, burdened with conditions and compromises. Her suspension was lifted, her name partially cleared. Not fully. Never fully. Some promotions would never come. Some colleagues would never meet her eyes again. The system had a long memory when it came to people who embarrassed it. Denise had stopped waiting for apologies. Outside the mall, she sat on a bench, letting the late afternoon sun warm her face. Her phone buzzed once, a message from Maya. Another case dismissed. Tiana had posted a new video, mentoring other teens on how to document safely, how to protect themselves without losing their voices. Denise smiled. She thought about everything she had believed before Greenwood Mall, about how much faith she had placed in rank, policy, and good intentions. About how often she had told herself that staying quiet was the same as being strategic. It wasn't. Silence had a cost. It cost people their dignity, their time, their futures. She had paid it too. Denise stood, taking one last look at the mall. It didn't feel like closure. Not exactly. It felt like understanding. Justice didn't arrive because she had authority. It arrived because the truth was seen, shared, and refused to be buried by people who had nothing to gain but everything to lose. In the end, the person they underestimated didn't just change the outcome. She exposed the cost of silence. And that echo, Denise knew as she walked away, would last far longer than any verdict.